The will reading was digital. My sister Lena in her sleek Manhattan apartment, me in my cramped rental, and between us, the lawyer's impassive face announcing our inheritances. To Lena Whitmore, the Burlington penthouse valued at $2.3 million. A pause, then, to Calla Whitmore, the family farmhouse in rural Vermont. My sister's smirk said everything. She'd gotten the prize while I'd received the burden. Another victory in our lifelong, uneven competition. What none of us understood then was that beneath that tumbledown farmhouse lay secrets my father had buried for decades. Secrets worth killing for. Secrets that would reveal why I'd always felt like an outsider in my own family. They'd all underestimated me, my sister, my husband, even my father from beyond the grave. But the old house knew who I really was. And as I turned the rusted key in that forgotten lock, something long dormant in my blood began to stir, whispering of betrayal, birthright, and a reckoning long overdue. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The lawyer's face on my laptop screen looked uncomfortable as he cleared his throat. I could see my sister Lena in her own video box, perfectly coiffed as always, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. I tugged at my cardigan sleeve, already knowing how this would go. And to my eldest daughter, Lena Whitmore, I leave our Burlington penthouse apartment and all its contents, valued at approximately $2.3 million. Lena's smile widened. She flicked her blonde hair over her shoulder, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. The lawyer continued, barely pausing. And to my younger daughter, Calla Whitmore, I leave the family farmhouse property in Hiddenvale, Vermont, along with its surrounding 5 acres. I blinked at the screen. The farmhouse? That ancient, rotting place my father had refused to even talk about? I hadn't been there since I was 7. This concludes the reading of the will, the lawyer said, shuffling papers. Are there any questions? Lena spoke first. No questions. Thank you for your time. Her voice was honey-smooth, confident. She looked directly at me through the screen. Congratulations, little sister. Quite the inheritance. The sarcasm wasn't subtle. The penthouse versus a decrepit farmhouse. It wasn't hard to see who'd gotten the better deal. Again. After the call ended, I sat motionless at my kitchen table. Memories flooded back. Lena's dance recitals with my parents beaming in the front row, while my art shows went unattended. Lena's straight-A report cards on the refrigerator, while my creative writing awards gathered dust in a drawer. Lena, polished and driven. Me, awkward and dreamy. The golden child and the afterthought. I was still sitting there when Damien came home. My husband's expensive cologne announced his arrival before he walked into the kitchen. So, he asked, loosening his tie. What did dear old Dad leave you? A farmhouse in Vermont, I said quietly. In Hiddenvale. Damien laughed, actually laughed. A farmhouse? What are you supposed to do with that? Let me guess, Lena got something actually valuable? The penthouse. Of course she did. He opened the refrigerator, his back to me. So, what's this farmhouse worth? Can we sell it? I don't know. I haven't been there since I was a kid. It was pretty run down even then. Damien turned, his expression hardening. Great. So, he left you a worthless money pit while Golden Girl Lena gets a multi-million-dollar property. Classic. He grabbed a beer and slammed the refrigerator door. This is just like you, Calla. Always settling. Always accepting whatever scraps they throw your way. What was I supposed to do? Demand more at the will reading? You've been demanding nothing your entire life, and look where it's gotten you. He gestured around our modest apartment. 34 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A part-time job at a bookstore.
No ambition. No backbone.
The words stung because they echoed my own darkest thoughts. I'd spent my life trying to please people who could never be pleased, including the man standing before me. Maybe I'll fix up the farmhouse, I said, surprising myself. Make something of it. Damien snorted. You? You can barely hang a picture frame. He took a long drink of his beer. You know what? Maybe you should go there. Figure things out on your own for once. Because I'm tired of carrying someone who won't carry herself. What are you saying? I'm saying don't come back until you've built something on your own. Prove you're not just a passenger in your own life. The words hung in the air between us. 15 years together, and it had come to this, an ultimatum over an inheritance I never asked for. 2 days later, I loaded a single suitcase into my car. Damien watched from the doorway, arms crossed, as if guarding against the possibility I might change my mind and stay. But as I pulled away, all I felt was a strange mixture of humiliation and something else, something that felt dangerously like relief. The drive to Hidden Vale took nearly 4 hours. The GPS lost signal as I turned onto the unmarked dirt road leading to the property. Ancient maples formed a canopy overhead, their leaves just beginning to show hints of autumn gold. The farmhouse appeared around a bend, a 2-story colonial with peeling white paint, sagging front porch, and overgrown yard. A strange lump formed in my throat. This was mine now. This beautiful, broken thing. I parked and just stared at it for a while. The roof needed work. The porch steps looked unsafe. Ivy had claimed one entire side of the house. Behind it stood a large, weathered barn and a small shed with a rusted padlock. I had no memory of that shed. When I finally got out of the car, the silence was absolute. No traffic noise, no neighbors, no Damien telling me what I was doing wrong. Just birds and wind through leaves. I took a deep breath of the clean mountain air and felt something inside me unclench for the first time in years. The front door key was old and heavy in my hand. It turned with a reluctant groan, and I stepped inside to dust, cobwebs, and the smell of neglect. But underneath was something else, with smoke, old books, perhaps even a trace of baking bread. The ghosts of what this place had once been. I walked through downstairs rooms filled with sheet-covered furniture and up a creaking staircase to find 4 bedrooms. One still had a child's wallpaper, faded carousel horses that seemed oddly familiar. Had that been my room during summer visits, I barely remembered. By evening, I'd cleared enough space to set up a makeshift bed and unpacked my meager belongings. I sat on the front porch with a flashlight and a sandwich, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk, wondering what I was supposed to do next. The next morning, I drove into town for supplies. Hidden Vale was small, a main street with basic necessities, a diner, and a hardware store. As I walked from shop to shop, I noticed people staring. Not the friendly curiosity you might expect in a small town, but something more guarded. One older woman actually crossed the street when she saw me coming. At the hardware store, I was struggling to figure out what I needed when a deep voice behind me asked, "You're a Whitmore, aren't you?" I turned to find a tall man with broad shoulders, dark hair streaked with gray, and the kind of weathered face that spoke of outdoor work. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms covered in intricate tattoos. I guessed him to be in his mid-40s. "Yes," I said, cautious.
I'm Kala Whitmore.
Something flickered in his blue eyes. Recognition? Wariness? "Ezra Bell," he said, not offering his hand. "You've inherited Margot's place." "My father's farmhouse, yes." His mouth tightened slightly. "That house needs a lot of work. Roof's bad. Probably got water damage. Foundation might be compromised." "Are you a contractor?" I asked. "Carpenter." He paused. "I can take a look if you want. No charge for an assessment." I should have felt relieved at the offer of help, but something in his manner made me hesitate. "Why would you do that?" "Let's just say I've got history with that property." He handed me a business card. "Call if you want me to stop by." After he left, the cashier leaned over. "Be careful with that one," she whispered. "Ezra Bell keeps to himself for good reason." Back at the farmhouse, I managed to get the electricity working and spent the afternoon clearing cobwebs and dust. As evening approached, I tackled the living room, moving furniture and rolling up a stained rug. That's when I noticed it, one floorboard that didn't quite match the others. I pried it up with a screwdriver and found a small leather-bound book wedged in the space beneath. The journal was old, its pages yellowed. Inside, handwritten entries dated back to the 1970s. The first page bore only the initial M and a quote, The truth outlives its keeper. I read until my eyes grew tired, piecing together that M was a woman named Margot, the same name Ezra had mentioned. She wrote about the beauty of the seasons, her garden, and something called the Vermont Agreement that appeared multiple times without explanation. One entry sent a chill through me. April 18th, 1979. They'll try to erase me, but this land remembers. The agreement ensures what's mine stays mine. Blood speaks louder than paper. One day, someone will come who understands. Blood calls to blood. I closed the journal, suddenly aware of how dark the house had grown around me. Blood calls to blood. The words echoed in my mind as I tried to remember if I'd ever heard anyone in my family mention someone named Margot. The name stirred something deep and distant, like a half-forgotten dream. That night, I dreamed of a woman with my eyes, standing in the garden behind the house, watching me through time. The next morning, I called Ezra Bell. He arrived an hour later in a battered pickup truck, tools rattling in the bed. "Place looks worse than I remembered," he said by way of greeting, staring up at the sagging roofline. "Can it be fixed?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "Anything can be fixed. Question is whether it's worth fixing." "It's worth it to me." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "We'll start with the roof. Can't do anything else if rain's getting in." I followed him as he inspected the house, making notes and occasionally pointing out problems. The foundation was actually solid, but the roof needed immediate attention, along with the front porch and some rotted window frames. "I can't afford to hire a full crew," I admitted when he finished. "Wasn't offering one," he said. "Just me. And you'll help." "Me? I don't know the first thing about construction." "You'll learn." His expression softened slightly. "Look, I've got another job finishing up this week. I can start here next Monday. In the meantime, clear out anything you don't want to keep. And stay off that porch until I brace it." Over the next few days, I sorted through decades of abandoned possessions. Most were worthless: mouse-chewed linens, outdated appliances, broken furniture. But occasionally I found treasures: hand-stitched quilts, a collection of vinyl records, and beautiful old tools in the barn. On Friday night, I was removing peeling wallpaper in the dining room when I discovered something behind it: dozens of letters pressed flat against the plaster. They were addressed to Margot Whitmore from various dates in the 1970s. One caught my eye, postmarked 1977, from a law firm in Burlington. "Ms. Whitmore, we regret to inform you that without the original document, we cannot pursue your claim regarding the inheritance betrayal you described. The altered deed appears legally sound without evidence of tampering. As for your other concern, we strongly advise against searching for what you believe is hidden beneath the roots, as unauthorized excavation could result in trespassing charges. If you locate the original Vermont Agreement, please contact us immediately. Sincerely, Blackwood and Moss, attorneys at law." Inheritance betrayal? Hidden beneath the roots? The Vermont Agreement again. I carefully removed all the letters and added them to Margot's journal, which I'd been reading each night. The entries painted a picture of a passionate, nature-loving woman who'd fought some unnamed injustice. She mentioned him frequently with clear bitterness, but never by name. On Sunday, my phone rang. "Lena, how's the shack?" she asked, not bothering with the greeting. "It's a farmhouse, not a shack." "Whatever. Listen, I've been thinking. That place must be a nightmare for you. I'm willing to buy it. $20,000. You can come back to civilization and start over." I thought about the journal, the letters, the mystery unfolding around me. "It's not for sale." "Don't be stupid, Calla. What are you going to do out there all alone? Play farmer? You can barely keep houseplants alive." "I'm figuring it out." I surprised myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Well, don't come crying to me when you fail." Again. She hung up. Ezra arrived Monday morning with lumber and roofing materials. We fell into an unexpected rhythm over the following weeks. He taught, I learned. He showed me how to tear off old shingles, replace rotted wood, lay new roofing. My soft hands grew calluses. My arms strengthened. At first, we barely spoke beyond necessary instructions, but gradually that changed. "You're not what I expected," he said one afternoon as we worked side by side. "What did you expect? Someone more like your father." "You knew my father?" Ezra was silent for a long moment. "I worked for your family's estate. Groundskeeper, handyman. Years ago." "I don't remember you." "You wouldn't. You were young. And I didn't last long." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. That evening, an old woman appeared at my door. She was tiny, with silver hair in a long braid and sharp, assessing eyes. "You're Margot's blood," she said without introduction. "I see her in your face." "I'm Calla Whitmore," I said, confused. "Who are you?" "Gilly Winters. Margot and I were friends." She peered past me into the house. "You've been changing things. Fixing things." She shook her head. "Some things are better, left broken. Secrets buried don't want to be found." "What secrets?" "Did you know Margot well?" "Since girlhood. I was here at the end, too." Her expression darkened. "Your father made sure she died with nothing." "My father? What did he do to her?" Gilly's mouth set in a firm line. "Not my place to tell. But hear me, girl. There's danger in digging up the past. The Whitmore name isn't loved in these parts. Be careful who you trust." With that cryptic warning, she left. That night, I was awakened by a sound from outside. Grabbing a flashlight, I crept downstairs and peeked through the window. A figure was at the shed behind the house, working at the padlock. I flung open the back door.
"Hey!"
I shouted. The figure bolted, disappearing into the woods. In the morning, I found bolt cutters abandoned by the shed. The lock was damaged but intact. When I reported the attempted break-in to the local sheriff, his response was oddly dismissive. "Probably just kids," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Not much crime out here. Someone left bolt cutters. That seems pretty deliberate." He shifted uncomfortably when I gave my name. "Look, Ms. Whitmore, I'll have a deputy drive by occasionally, but there's not much else we can do." When I mentioned the incident to Ezra, his reaction was immediate. "What's in that shed?" "I don't know. It's locked." "We should find out." His tone was urgent. We broke the padlock that afternoon. The shed was mostly empty except for gardening tools and empty plant pots. But Ezra immediately went to a section of flooring in the corner. "Help me with this," he said, prying up floorboards to reveal dark soil beneath. We dug down about 2 feet before hitting something solid, a small rusted safe. "How did you know this was here?" I asked as we hauled it out. Ezra's face was grim. "Because I helped bury it." The safe sat between us on the porch, caked with dirt and decades old. Ezra looked at it like it might bite.
"Whose is it?"
I asked. "Margot's," he said quietly. "Your father ordered me to bury it after she died. Said it was full of her crazy ravings. Nothing more." "And you did it?" "Just buried her things." His jaw tightened. I was 23, needed the job. But I marked the spot. Always thought someone should find it someday. It took us hours to open the safe, WD-40, careful manipulation, and finally brute force with a crowbar. Inside were stacks of documents, land deeds, letters, old photographs. And at the bottom, a cassette tape labeled simply proof. I found an old boom box in the attic that still worked. We sat in silence as voices crackled from the speakers. "You won't get away with this, Robert." A woman's voice, strong despite age. "It's already done, Margot." The cold reply from a voice I recognized, my father. "The Vermont agreement is null and void. Your signature is on the transfer documents." "That's not my signature, and you know it. You forged it. This land was never meant for you." "Prove it." "Oh wait, you can't, because the original agreement disappeared." "How convenient." "This was my inheritance, Robert. Mine by blood right. Your father promised." My father was a sentimental old fool. The Whitmore estate belongs to the Whitmore name, not some distant relation who married in. I've spent 20 years building a real estate empire. You think I'd let this prime development land sit idle because of some handshake deal? The recording continued, revealing a shocking truth. The Vermont agreement was a legally binding document signed by my grandfather, ensuring the Hidden Vale property would go to Margot Whitmore upon his death. But my father had forged documents to invalidate it, planning to develop the land into luxury vacation homes. Margot had fought him for years but died before she could prove the forgery. I looked at Ezra when the tape finished. You knew about this. He nodded slowly. Not all of it, but enough. I found some of Margot's papers while working here. Your father caught me looking. Offer me money to keep quiet and help bury anything that could cause him trouble. And you took it. My voice was flat. I did.
No excuses.
Biggest regret of my life. Been trying to make up for it ever since.
How?
By hiding out in the woods. By keeping silent all these years. By waiting. For this. He gestured at me and the safe. Margot always said someone would come who could make it right. I spread the documents across the dining room table. Land deeds, survey maps, correspondence between my grandfather and Margot. Photocopies of the original Vermont agreement, not the document itself, but evidence it had existed. And something else. Margot's will. Leaving everything she owned to my blood kin, should they ever find their way home. Who was she? I asked. To my family? Your grandfather's cousin. She grew up on this land. When your grandfather expanded the Whitmore real estate business to Burlington, she stayed to care for the farmhouse and land. They were close. He promised it would always be hers. I thought of the journal entries. The initial M. The woman who'd fought so hard. Why would my father do this to her?
Money. Power.
The land alone is worth millions to developers. But Margot refused to sell. She loved this place, protected it. Ezra looked around. She was the heart of Hidden Vale. That's why people here act strange around me. They think I'm like him. Can you blame them? Your father tried to force half the town to sell their land, too. I made a decision then. I'm going to make this right, whatever that means. The next morning, I scanned the documents and emailed copies to Lena. Her response was immediate and furious. This is ancient history and obvious forgery. Don't bother trying to challenge the will. You'll waste what little money you have. If you pursue this, I'll sue you for defamation. Word spread quickly in Hidden Vale. Some locals began to warm to me, offering stories about Margot, her kindness, her gardens, her fierce protection of the land. Others remained distant, skeptical of any Whitmore. Gilly returned a week later. She studied the items from the safe spread across my table.
So you found it, she said.
Margot told me he buried something, but not what or where. Did you know what my father did to her?
Parts.
Margot kept some secrets even from me. She picked up a photo of a younger Margot standing proudly in front of the farmhouse. There's more, you know. Margot left a manuscript, her whole story. Everything she couldn't prove but knew was true. Where is it? I helped her hide it. Under the old oak at the property line. The one with the swing. She looked at me intently. Be careful, child. Your father had powerful friends. Some still live. Some still profit from his schemes. That night, I waited until dark, then took a shovel to the ancient oak tree at the edge of my property. The swing was long gone, but I could see where it had been attached. I dug at the base of the trunk, on the side facing away from the house. About 2 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. A metal box. As I leaned down to pull it free, a voice behind me froze my blood. I knew you'd lead me to it eventually. I turned to find Damien standing there, a gun pointed casually in my direction, his face illuminated by his flashlight. What are you doing here? I managed to ask. Cleaning up a mess. He gestured with the gun. Open the box, Calla. How did you find me? Your sister is very persuasive. And generous. His smile was cold. We've had a nice arrangement for years. I keep an eye on the family disappointment. She keeps me comfortable. My mind reeled. You've been spying on me? For Alina? Spying sounds so dramatic. Managing is better. Making sure you stayed small, stayed insecure. Never asked questions about your family. Never looked too closely at the Whitmore empire Lena's been building. All these years. 15 years of subtle undermining. 15 years of being told I wasn't enough. Open the box, Calla.
Now.
With shaking hands, I lifted the manuscript from its metal container. What does Lena think you're going to do with this? Bring it to her, of course. He reached for it. But I'd spent weeks rebuilding this house. My hands were no longer soft. My arms were no longer weak. I swung the metal box hard, catching him off guard. The gun fired into the ground as he stumbled. I ran. Behind me, Damien shouted threats, but I knew these woods now. He didn't. I clutched the manuscript to my chest and disappeared into the darkness, blood pounding in my ears, running toward the only person I could think of who might help. Ezra's cabin was a mile through the forest. By the time I reached it, blood was trickling down my leg from where I'd gashed it on a fallen branch. He opened the door to my frantic knocking, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. He's coming, I gasped.
Damien.
He has a gun. He's working for Lena. Ezra moved quickly, locking doors, checking windows. He sat me down, cleaned my wound, and listened as I explained what had happened. We need to call the sheriff, he said. The sheriff who wouldn't even take a report about the break-in? Who looked terrified when I mentioned my name. He's probably on Lena's payroll, too. Then we read the manuscript. Find out what was worth killing for. We stayed up all night, poring over Margot's handwritten pages. What we found was more shocking than I could have imagined. Not only had my father stolen Margot's inheritance through forgery, but the document implicated him in a decades-long scheme involving bribes to local officials, environmental cover-ups, and illegal land seizures. Names were named, politicians still in office, business leaders still profiting. But the most stunning revelation came at the very end. A personal letter addressed to my daughter's daughter. To the one who finds this. If you are reading these words, you have found your way home at last. What Robert Whitmore stole from me was not just land, but the chance to know you. Your mother, Eleanor, was my daughter, not Robert's. She never knew the truth. We agreed it was safer that way. The proof is in your blood, in your eyes that match mine, in your spirit that led you back to this land. Robert suspected but could never prove it. When Eleanor married him, I feared the worst. When you were born, I knew someday you would return. The Vermont agreement was never just about land. It was about legacy, about keeping safe what matters. The original document is where no one but bloodkin would think to look. I have loved you from afar all your life.
Margot.
I sat back, stunned. My grandmother. She was my grandmother. Ezra's eyes widened. That's why your father was so determined to erase her. You weren't just a Whitmore heir. You were Margot's blood heir. Dawn was breaking when we heard vehicles approaching. Through the window, I saw police cars and an expensive black SUV I recognized as Lena's. They found us, I whispered. Ezra looked grim. They found us, but they haven't won yet. We need to get to the farmhouse, Ezra said, grabbing his truck keys. There's a cellar entrance through the back that doesn't show on any plans. We slipped out through his workshop and into the dense woods behind his cabin. The sound of car doors slamming echoed behind us. Dawn light filtered through the trees as we moved quickly, staying off the paths. How long have you known? I asked as we navigated fallen logs and underbrush. About Margot being my grandmother? I didn't know, Ezra said softly. But I suspected. You have her eyes. Her way of tilting your head when you're thinking. We reached the edge of the woods near my property. Ezra put a hand on my arm, pointing. 2 police cruisers were parked in my driveway, and Lena's black SUV sat like a predator next to them. Damien was gesturing wildly, pointing toward the woods. They'll search the house, I whispered. Let them. We're not going inside yet. Ezra led me along the tree line to where a small stream cut through the property. Margot showed me this years ago. There's a storm cellar entrance by the old well. It doesn't connect to the main cellar. The well was nothing more than a stone circle behind a cluster of overgrown bushes. Beside it, almost completely hidden by vegetation, was a slanted wooden door set into the ground. Ezra pulled it open to reveal stone steps descending into darkness. Ladies first, he said with a grim smile, handing me a small flashlight from his pocket. The air below was cool and damp. The space was small, maybe 10 feet square, with stone walls and a packed dirt floor. Metal shelves held ancient canning jars and dusty bottles. A narrow wooden door stood opposite the stairs. "Where does that lead?" I asked, pointing. "Root's cellar under the kitchen. There's a hidden panel in the floor." We sat in the dim light, listening to muffled voices and footsteps above us. I clutched Margot's manuscript to my chest. "We need to make copies," I said. "Get this to someone who can't be bought." "I know someone," Ezra replied. "A journalist in Burlington who's been investigating the Whitmore developments for years. She tried to interview Margot once before." He trailed off. Before my father silenced her. The words tasted bitter. "I still can't believe Damien. 15 years. Was any of it real?" Ezra's expression softened. "People like your sister and Damien, they see others as tools. Means to an end." "And what do you see?" I asked quietly. He held my gaze. "I see Margot's granddaughter. Finally home." A sudden crash above made us both freeze. Heavy footsteps moved across the kitchen floor. "Where is she?" Damien's voice, tight with anger. "Mr. Evans, please." An unfamiliar voice. One of the officers, presumably. "We're conducting a legal search. If your wife is trespassing..." "She's not trespassing. This is her property." Lena's voice now, sharp and commanding. "And she's stolen valuable family documents. I want them recovered immediately." "You mean the documents proving your father forged Margot's signature?" I whispered to myself. "The ones showing how he bribed officials and stole her land?" Ezra touched my arm, signaling silence. We waited as the search continued, listening to drawers opening, furniture moving. Finally, the voices receded. "They're checking the barn," Ezra whispered. "Now's our chance." We slipped through the door into the root cellar, then up through the hidden panel into the kitchen pantry. The house was a mess, drawers emptied onto the floor, furniture overturned, even the wallpaper torn in places. "They're looking for the original Vermont agreement," I realized. Margot said it was where only blood kin would think to look. "Any ideas?" Ezra asked. I closed my eyes, thinking of Margot's journal entries. The carousel horses on the bedroom wallpaper. The way she'd written about the land, the house, the changing seasons. "The garden," I said suddenly. "She wrote about planting things to mark the seasons. What if she meant it literally?" Outside, voices carried from the barn. We had minutes at most. "What are we looking for?" Ezra asked as we crept out the back door toward the overgrown garden. "I don't know exactly. Something planted. Something that would last." The garden was wild now, but I could see the bones of what had once been a beautiful space. Stone pathways, raised beds, a small pond choked with reeds. In the center stood an ancient rose bush, its woody stems twisted with age, a few late blooms still clinging to the branches. "The roses," I breathed. In her journal, she wrote about planting roses for Eleanor, my mother. I began digging at the base of the rose bush, fingers clawing through soil until they hit something solid. A metal box, similar to the one that had held the manuscript, but smaller. Inside was a plastic bag containing a single document, yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. The Vermont agreement, with my grandfather's signature and Margot's, dated 1958. "Got you," I whispered. "Well, well." Damien's voice came from behind us. "Digging in the dirt again, Calla? Always were good at getting your hands dirty." I turned to find him standing at the garden entrance, gun pointed casually in our direction. Behind him, Lena emerged from around the corner of the house. "I'll take that," she said, gesturing to the document in my hands. "It's not yours," I replied, standing my ground. "It never was. This land belonged to Margot. My father stole it from her." "Spare me the dramatics," Lena said, stepping closer. "Our father built something from nothing. This backwater property was wasted on that old woman." "She was our grandmother," I said. Lena faltered, just for a second. "What?" "Margot was our grandmother. Mom was her daughter, not Dad's. That's why he hated her so much. That's why he erased her." "You're lying." But uncertainty had crept into her voice. It's all in the manuscript. DNA will prove it. I took a step toward her. He built his empire on forgery and fraud, Lena. And you've been protecting his crimes. Give me the document, Calla. Damien's voice was dangerously low.
Now.
Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? The police are right over there. The police work for me, Lena snapped. Just like your husband. Just like half this town. Not all of us. The new voice came from behind Lena and Damien. Sheriff Wilson stood there, but he wasn't alone. With him were at least a dozen townspeople, including Gilly. And behind them, a woman with a press badge and camera. Rebecca Green, Burlington Chronicle, she said, camera raised. Mind telling me why you're pointing a gun at these people, sir? Damien lowered the weapon instantly. This is private property. We're having a family dispute. About these? Sheriff Wilson held up copies of Margot's manuscript pages. Ms. Winters brought these by my office this morning. Mighty interesting reading. Lena's composure cracked. Those are fabricated, obviously. Maybe, the sheriff allowed. But they name names.
Dates.
Amounts. Enough for a proper investigation. He turned to me. Ms. Whitmore, is that the original agreement? I nodded, holding it up. I'll need that as evidence. Evidence of what? Lena demanded. Fraud, to start with, the sheriff replied. Maybe conspiracy. Depends what else we find once people start talking. He gestured to his deputy. Mr. Evans, I'll take that weapon now. As Damien surrendered his gun, looking shell-shocked, Lena pulled out her phone. This is ridiculous. My lawyers will have this sorted out by dinner. Maybe, I said quietly. But the story's already spreading. How many people will talk once they know they're not alone? How many secrets can your money bury? For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my sister's eyes. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of depositions, legal meetings, and press inquiries. The Burlington Chronicle ran a front-page exposé. Whitmore empire built on fraud, decades of corruption exposed. Rebecca Green, the journalist Ezra had contacted, dove deep into the story, uncovering more than even Margot's manuscript had revealed. 2 state senators and a judge resigned. 4 local officials faced criminal charges. Lena's phone records showed calls to Damien going back to before our marriage, 15 years of manipulation and surveillance, all to keep me from discovering my true heritage. Through it all, I kept working on the farmhouse. The physical labor grounded me as my world tilted on its axis. Ezra was there daily now, not just for repairs, but as a steady presence amid the chaos. You don't have to stay, I told him one evening as we sat on the newly rebuilt porch. Your part in this is done. Is it? He looked at me thoughtfully. Feels like it's just beginning. DNA tests confirmed what Margot's letter had claimed. I was her biological granddaughter. My mother had been her daughter, not Robert Whitmore's. The revelation left me questioning everything about my identity, my childhood, my very sense of self. Did my mother know? I asked Gilly one afternoon as we sorted through old photographs Gilly had brought over. Pictures of Margot throughout her life. I don't think so, Gilly said, handing me a photo of a young Margot standing beside a woman who looked startlingly like me. Margot and your mother agreed it was safer if Eleanor believed she was Robert's daughter. He was a powerful man, dangerous when crossed. And my mother and Margot, they were close? Gilly hesitated. They had a complicated relationship. Eleanor loved her mother, but she also loved Robert, or who she thought was her father. When he turned against Margot, Eleanor was caught in the middle. She chose him, I said quietly. She chose what seemed safe. Gilly touched my hand. Don't judge her too harshly. She was very young and Robert was very convincing. By the time she realized her mistake, she was trapped in his world. But she brought me here as a child. I remember now, the carousel wallpaper, the garden, the swing. She wanted me to know this place. She did what she could. Small rebellions. Gilly smiled sadly. Margot got to meet you a few times. Those were her happiest days. The legal battle intensified. Lena's lawyers challenged everything, the authenticity of the Vermont agreement, the DNA results, Margot's manuscript. But as more people came forward with their own stories of Robert Whitmore's misconduct, her position weakened. Then came the day I'd been dreading, facing Damien in court. He looked smaller somehow, sitting at the witness table. The confident, commanding man who had belittled me for years was gone, replaced by someone defensive and diminished. It was just business, he insisted when questioned about his arrangement with Lena. Calla was never supposed to get hurt. Yet you married her under false pretenses, my attorney pointed out. Maintained that deception for 15 years. Deliberately undermined her confidence and independence, all while reporting her activities to her sister. I cared for Calla, Damien protested, looking at me. That part wasn't fake. I stared back, unmoved. Was it caring when you pointed a gun at me? He had no answer for that. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. I'd avoided them until now, but something in me had shifted. I stood on the steps beside my attorney, Bernice Tomlinson, a retired lawyer who had once fought against my father and lost her license for supposedly fabricating evidence. The Whitmore name has cast a long shadow over this community, I told the cameras. Today, we begin to step into the light. This isn't about money or property. It's about truth. It's about restoration. That evening, Ezra found me sitting by Margot's rose bush. You did well today, he said, settling beside me on the ground. I didn't do anything. Margot did it all years ago. She left breadcrumbs for me to follow. She left them, but you had to be brave enough to follow. He was quiet for a moment. What will you do if you win? With the properties, I mean. I'd been thinking about that for weeks. The Burlington penthouse will be sold. The proceeds will go to a foundation for affordable housing, environmental protection. Things Margot would have supported. I looked around at the farmhouse, the garden slowly coming back to life under my care. This place stays as it is. A home. A week later, the court made its ruling. The Vermont agreement was valid. Robert Whitmore's property transfers were deemed fraudulent. The penthouse and several other properties would revert to the newly established Margot Whitmore Foundation. The farmhouse and its land were legally mine. Lena didn't attend the final hearing. According to her assistant, she'd left for Europe the previous day, no return date planned. Her empire was crumbling, her reputation in tatters. I felt no triumph, only a strange, quiet peace. That night, I dreamed of my mother and Margot, standing together in the garden, watching me with identical eyes. Fall gave way to winter, and the farmhouse transformation continued. With the legal battle settled, I focused on honoring Margot's legacy. The bones of the house were sound now, roof repaired, windows replaced, porch rebuilt. But it wasn't just a restoration, it was a reimagining. What do you think about converting the barn into living quarters? I asked Ezra one snowy December afternoon as we reviewed plans at the kitchen table. Guest rooms, maybe a small library? Thinking of taking in boarders? He asked, eyebrow raised. Not exactly. More like a retreat. For writers, artists, people who need space to create. He nodded slowly. Margot would have liked that. Our working relationship had evolved into something neither of us had named yet. He still came every day, but now he stayed for dinner. Sometimes we talked late into the night about Margot, about the town's history, about the future. The media attention had mostly faded. Occasionally a reporter would call for follow-up, especially as the criminal cases against former officials progressed. I gave the same answer each time. I'm focused on rebuilding. Lena remained in Europe. Her lawyer sent a terse email. Ms. Whitmore wishes to settle any remaining matters without further litigation. Translated, she wanted to disappear with what remained of her fortune. I agreed, with one condition. She would provide all information about my mother's relationship with Margot. A week later, a box arrived containing photos, letters, and a diary I hadn't known existed. On a bitter January morning, I stood at my mother's grave in the Burlington Cemetery, then drove to the small churchyard in Hidden Vale where Margot was buried. I placed roses at both stones, a symbolic reunion of mother and daughter. I used to be so angry at my mother, I told Gilly later that day as we sorted through the newly arrived mementos. For always choosing Lena. for never standing up to my father. Now I wonder if she was just trying to survive. We all do what we can with the choices we have, Gilly said, placing a gentle hand on mine. Eleanor loved you. She just didn't know how to protect you from Robert without revealing secrets she'd been taught to keep. Spring came early to Vermont that year. As the snow melted, I began work on Margot's gardens, following the plans I'd found among her papers. Ezra built raised beds and trellises based on her sketches. The townspeople, who had once avoided me, now stopped by with seedlings, cuttings, and gardening advice. Miss Tomlinson helped establish the Margot Whitmore Foundation, which now owned the Burlington Penthouse and several other Whitmore properties. We sold most, using the proceeds for community projects, affordable housing, environmental restoration, arts programs. The foundation's first major project was purchasing a threatened wetland near Hiddenvale that my father had once tried to drain for development. Damien disappeared from my life as suddenly as he'd entered it. The divorce was quick and uncontested. He moved to Arizona, apparently. I wished him nothing. Not happiness, not misery. He simply no longer mattered. In April, I received an unexpected visitor, Rebecca Green, the journalist. I'm doing a follow-up piece, she explained as we walked the property. Not just on the scandal, but on what happens after. How communities heal. And what have you found? I asked. That it takes more than exposing the truth. She gestured to the farmhouse, the newly planted gardens, the barn in mid-renovation. It takes rebuilding, creating something new from the broken pieces. That evening, I found Ezra on the porch, staring at the sunset. I sat beside him, our shoulders touching. Rebecca asked if you were part of the story, I said, about how communities heal.
He turned to look at me.
What did you tell her? That some stories are too important to share with everyone. His hand found mine, calloused palm against calloused palm. And our story? Still being written? I said softly. Summer brought the first guest to what was now officially called Margot House. A poet from Boston. A playwright from Chicago. A young novelist from Seattle. They stayed in the renovated barn, wrote at desks overlooking the gardens, and gathered in the evenings for dinner in the farmhouse kitchen. Tell us about Margot, the novelist asked one night. The woman this place is named for. So I did. I told them about her fight for the land, her love of growing things, her refusal to be erased. I didn't tell them everything. Some truths remained private, shared only with those who had lived them. But I gave them enough to understand why this place mattered, why it had been worth saving. In August, I began writing my own story. Not for publication, at least not yet, but as a way to make sense of everything that had happened. I wrote in the mornings on the porch, surrounded by Margot's roses now in full bloom. Ezra found me there one morning, laptop open, coffee gone cold. Stuck, he asked, sitting beside me. Trying to find the right ending. He smiled. Who says it has to end? That autumn, exactly 1 year after I'd first arrived at the Tumbledown farmhouse, we held a ceremony in the garden. The Margot Whitmore Foundation was officially opening its doors to applications. Local officials, newly elected after the scandal, gave speeches about community renewal. Former victims of my father's schemes shared their stories of recovery. I stood before them, no longer the invisible daughter or the family disappointment, but something entirely new, Margot's granddaughter, keeper of her legacy. A year ago, I came here believing I'd been given the lesser inheritance, I told the gathered crowd. What I didn't understand then was that true inheritance isn't measured in property values or prestige. It's measured in truth, in connection, in purpose. I looked out at the faces, Gilly, Bernice Tomlinson, Rebecca Green, townspeople who had become friends, and Ezra, standing quietly at the back, his eyes never leaving mine. Margot knew that. She left me not just a house, but a home. Not just a property, but a purpose. And most importantly, she left me the truth, that we are more than the names we carry or the facades we build. We are the choices we make when those facades crumble. The following morning, a car pulled into the driveway, an unfamiliar sedan with New York plates. A young woman stepped out, looking nervous, clutching a printout of our website. Is this Margot House? She asked. The writer's retreat? It is, I replied, standing on the porch Ezra and I had rebuilt together. I have a reservation. For the fall session. She looked around uncertainly. I'm working on a book about family secrets. Someone recommended this place. I smiled and opened the door wide. You've come to the right place. Welcome to Margot House. What would you sacrifice to discover your true inheritance? Not the wealth passed down, but the truth of who you really are. If this story of secrets, betrayal, and redemption spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share for more tales that uncover what lies beneath the surface of the families we think we know.